Good afternoon, everyone. This is the quarterly meeting of the Washoe County School District Audit Committee. It's Thursday, November 4th, 3:30 p.m. We apologize for being a little bit tardy. We were engaging in some last-minute technical issues. I'm going to call the meeting to order now. And I guess we have roll call. So,
Ben Bartow,
Present.
Wesley Chugilern,
Recording in progress.
he's not here. Todd Shipley, he's also not here. Ron Ellis,
here.
Jennifer Thomas,
Here.
Vida Ozude,
Here.
Deborah Yates.
Present.
Okay,
Okay, we have a quorum.
thank you. Okay, I guess first thing on the agenda is discussion, presentation, and action items. Do we have any public comment on this agenda item that we need to consider?
There's no public comment.
Okay. So the first thing is approval of the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held August 9th, 2021.
I, Jennifer Thomas, move that the Audit Committee approve the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on August 19th, 2021.
I, Deborah Yates, second.
Okay. We have a motion before us, and having been seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, next item is discussion and possible action to recommend to the Washoe County School District the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ended June 30, 2021 be forwarded to the Board of Trustees for acceptance. I understand we have a presentation.
Hello, Jessica Young, Controller. As you all are aware, NRS requires that an annual audit be performed on the district's financial statements by a certified public accountant and then be submitted to the board for approval within 4 months. The audit consists of an external review of the financial statements to ensure that they comply with all governmental standards and fairly present in all material respects the financial position of the school's activities. This is the second year that we have had our audit performed by the firm Crow LLP, and here today to present the audit results for the district is the senior manager, Charles Ribley, and a partner in the firm, Jeff Jensen.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak with you all about the results of the external audit. I've got a quick presentation for you to talk through a couple of key items to communicate the results of the 2021 audit over the ACFR, or Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. So I'll kind of advance here. So our audit approach is really designed to identify, as Ms. Young mentioned, identifying as to whether the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects. And so our responsibility is to express an opinion over the financial statements and with federal compliance. And understand and interpret and incorporate the risks of material misstatement in the financial statements. And as part of that process, we're also evaluating internal controls that are key to those financial components that are included in the ACFR. And so that all kind of builds together to become what we call a risk-based audit approach. So we're looking at the areas in the financial statements that have more subjectivity to them included, and we look at that, tailor our audit approach to identify those risks and then audit those that have a greater risk at more specific detail. So as far as the timing and the scope of the audit, so we've got kind of a three-phased approach that we take to the annual audit. So the first phase was conducted in May, June timeframe, where we're looking at our internal control evaluation. As I mentioned, we're also doing some planning as it relates to the federal audit. And I say federal audit, and that's really referring to the fact that because Washoe County School District is expending more than $750,000 of federal grant money in any given year, you're required to have this separate, we call it a single audit or a uniform guidance audit, so for those audit of those federal dollars. So that phase 1 has been completed in May and June, moving into the phase 2, which is really about our our year-end auditing. So looking at the final numbers for the fiscal year and incorporating, substantive testing over those balances. And then moving into the October timeframe, we're looking through the financial reporting and completion phase. So really compiling the document that you see before you and getting a final result put together. In the current year, we had some new accounting standards that were incorporated into the ACFR. And so I wanted to talk about what those were and what the impact is to the report that you see before you. The first one is called Governmental Accounting Standards Board Standard 84. And what that was doing was really, in the impact directly to the ACFR in Washoe, was incorporating the student activity funds into a special revenue fund. So instead, in prior years, it would have been included as a agency type relationship, meaning that the district is responsible for maintaining those funds, but it's not included in the district's actual financial records. So the GASB 84 changed that interpretation, or well, I guess you would say that it was a revised interpretation of how the relationship is between the student activity funds and the district. And so that changed or revised relationship. It made these funds incorporate into the district's governmental funds. And so that made an increase to the governmental funds balance of $9.5 million and a correlating increase to the overall position of the district of that same amount. In addition, because of GASB 84, the other post-employment benefit trust fund, which is an agency relationship, is incorporated in as reported as a fiduciary fund, kind of in the back of the financials. Again, you're responsible for it as a district, but it's separately held in an irrevocable trust, so it's kind of an agency relationship. The second new accounting standard was actually fairly recently put out there, and that's the GASB standard number 98, and that's the annual comprehensive financial report. So if you recall, in prior years, this was called a comprehensive annual financial report, or and then there's an acronym of CAFR or CAFR. This new standard replaced that term with annual comprehensive financial report, or ACFR, and so that's been incorporated into the reporting that you see before you for the 2015 year. 2021 year. So the other area that we're required to communicate with you as those charged with governance is other corrected or uncorrected misstatements. And corrected and uncorrected misstatements really refers to changes that we've identified in the financial reporting in order to give our opinion over the financial statements. Corrected would be areas that we actually required or asked management to post an adjusting journal entry in the financials in order to give our opinion. Uncorrected is differences that we identified in our auditing procedures that weren't large enough to require for us to require that adjustment, but large enough to be communicated to you all. And so I'm glad to say that in the current 2021 fiscal year, we didn't have any uncorrected or corrected misstatements to communicate. And so some of the other required communications that we're to make to you all is whether or not we had any difficulties in conducting the audit. So if we had disagreements with management on how to account for something that we couldn't resolve, or if we had difficulties in general being able to complete the audit that were an issue that precluded us from giving our opinion, then we would be required to communicate that with you formally in this meeting. And then if we were aware of any consultations with other accountants, so if we knew that management went out to another accounting firm and looked for how that other firm would have opined on an accounting issue, we would be letting you know formally in this meeting. I guess on those first 3 bullet points in general, I would say that if we had any of those issues identified, we would definitely have communicated it before this meeting. That wouldn't be the first time you'd be hearing it today. So I think that's important to make. And then if there were any other significant issues really involved in the audit process that we wanted to make you aware of, we would let you know at this time. However, we didn't have any issues to communicate. And so the end result of our audit process is kind of those two components, as I mentioned, the financial statements themselves, which we've been given an unmodified opinion, and then the federal compliance, or that single audit that I mentioned as well, as an unmodified opinion. And so I think overall, I would summarize to say that that's a great result for this year, with our challenges of having to do things differently than we've been accustomed to doing that from an external audit perspective. Management did a great job of kind of pulling things together for us and compiling the annual comprehensive financial report as we expected it to be. So I'll transition over now to Jeff Jensen, and he's going to cover some more communication points that we wanted to discuss.
With the federal compliance too, this year you had all the stimulus funds essentially that were audited as part of this year's audit. So a lot of at least two programs that previously hadn't been audited before because they didn't exist before the pandemic. So those funds were covered under this year's audit. On the next slide here, we have just some financial highlights for you and for the board here as far as where the district stands financially. So for the year ended June 30th, 2021, you had total assets of about $1.9 billion. And the total net position stood at a negative $319 million for this year. And really, when you look at what draws that in from a negative perspective, as you get into the net pension liability, which is your pension benefits for retirees, and then also your net OPEB liability, which is your other post-employment benefits, your healthcare benefits for retirees. So between those two, you have about $833 million worth of liabilities just with that balance right there. So, if you were to factor, let's say, that back out, you could see obviously your net position would be substantially different. Your total change in net position for this fiscal year was actually a positive $53.4 million. Looking more specifically at the general fund, and obviously that's more of your operations and the way the district does business on a daily basis. There you have a fund balance at the end of the year of $58.2 million and a positive change in the current year fund balance of $5.8 million. In the current year, we had a large bond offering there for $130.5 million. So that activity happened in the current year, as well as $4.7 million in direct placement debt too for other debt transactions. The next slide here, we in last year's audit committee meeting that we met with you and talking with management, we know that the pension liability and the OPEB liability are both balances of interest to this committee and to the board, and obviously, as I mentioned before, the fact that they do have a substantial position within your balance sheet there, your statement of net position. And so we just wanted to spend a minute just kind of covering how those balances are determined and how they, what effects management really has or doesn't have on how those liabilities ultimately end up in your financial statement. So, looking at the pension liability being a part of Nevada PERS, the balance, you're proportionally participating in that, right? So, and ultimately the decisions on measurement and those sorts of decisions are all made at their level, not at the district level. So, ultimately what management can do is ultimately just record their proportionate share as it's put out by the pension system itself. And so that, like I said, is actuarially determined, and there's a number of factors obviously that go into the actuarial, and then your proportionate piece, so your size relation to everybody else that's participating in the pool is ultimately, how they carve up that total liability into the portion that gets recorded on your financial statements. And then the second liability is the OPEB liability, and again, this relates to your retirees' healthcare benefits and other benefits that may go to retirees. And again, that's also actuarially determined, and the current financial resources required for these benefits are limited to the current year benefits of the current retirees. So, essentially, we're again, measuring what that liability could be if we were to stop time and everybody received their benefits to the end of the plan. But the reality is that's not the case, right? And so, those, and you actually have 3 different OPEB plans there that the district participates in, that we're drawing a liability to for that total liability that we mentioned on the previous slide. And just the last couple of prepared comments that we have, and then happy to answer any questions that you have, are that the district's financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects, which is a great thing to be able to bring back to the committee and to the board as well. And we have no audit adjustments, so we have a clean audit from an audit adjustment perspective. We also have no findings. And so, the other opinion that you'll find in this report is also related to government auditing standards, and if we had any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control, we would have to modify that opinion and include those comments in the report. And we have no such comments to bring to the committee. So again, good news. And then also statutorily with Nevada revised statutes there, we have no compliance comments there. And lastly, just to thank everyone throughout the district for their help throughout this audit. I mean, as you can see, it goes on for quite a while, right? I mean, it started in May and we wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. And, over the course of that time, we talked to folks that are in the grants department. We talked to fiscal people in human resources and payroll. So we touch a lot of different departments within the district, and everyone's always makes themselves available, and we're able to fulfill the requests that we had to be able to document our audit and ultimately be able to sign the opinion on your financial statements. So thank you to Mark and Robbie and Jessica and the team there, specifically in fiscal, but also throughout the district too, for all their help. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions, discussion? Are there any?
I do. So first, I wanted to say to Mark and staff, I think this was an exceptionally well-done document. I was able to get every question that I had answered by digging deeper, so that was good. To the auditors, I would like to ask, you said that there were no findings that had significant deficiencies. There were no corrected misstatements or uncorrected misstatements. Can you talk about what the thresholds are? I know this district is exceptionally large. So I'm just kind of curious about what the thresholds would be that would rise to the level that you would possibly make those notations.
So there are several different opinion units within this report, right? So there's the globally for the district, and then there's each major fund and the aggregate for non-major funds. And so we have to apply materiality to each of those different opinion units because ultimately we're opining on each of those. Then within there, we have to both qualitatively and quantitatively come up with what we believe is a threshold, and it's a number that we keep to ourselves as auditors, as to when we believe a number would rise to a level that would misstate someone using these financial, or would mislead somebody using these financials or relying upon those. So, while we kind of tell you in summary that there's no misstatements for the audit, there's actually no misstatements on any of those opinion units too, and they're at different, they would be at different levels depending on whether we're talking about the government-wide financial statements or just the general fund or any of the other major funds of the district. So I'm not sure I directly answered your question there because I wouldn't share the dollar amount of what that number is, because ultimately if we did that, then your fiscal services team, if they wanted to be bad people, could then go, okay, well, as long as I keep the transactions below this dollar amount, they're never going to find me, kind of thing, right? So that's I mean, ultimately one of the main reasons why we never disclose or share that dollar amount.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments?
I don't have questions, but I was happy with the report. I read it carefully, and I thank the district for doing a great job. For the auditors to come in and with no material misstatements, and everything looked fine. So I just want to thank the district and thank the auditors for presenting a report that is readable, understandable, and that's just my comment.
And I'll go ahead and chime in and echo those sentiments. I read the report as soon as I received it. Took me several days to digest it. I want to focus in on one thing and just make a comment about the pension benefits and OPEBs that you have and the actuarial calculations that go into that. There's a lot of assumptions that go into those numbers, and those assumptions can change. There's things such as what discount rate you use, the average expected life, the lifespan of the retirees and how long they're going to draw a pension when they retire, years of service. Am I leaving anything out? And then the actuarial calculations themselves, where they just kind of like crunch all of those assumptions and come out with a number and say, this is what we think your liability is. The other thing, of course, is market performance that goes into that, the investment performance. So I don't, I guess the point I'm trying to say is I understand what goes into those calculations, and it looks like a scary number. And I would also comment, with all of my private sector experience, if we were in the private sector, they would now be presenting the non-GAAP numbers to show how great the district did if you take out this number, but we won't do that. That being said, are we ready to make a motion to send this on to the Board of Trustees? Please.
One quick question. On the slide, the GASB 84, the new implementation, it just crossed my mind when that was up there. So would we expect to see a prior period adjustment if we're going to move from agency fund to dump the student activity funds from agency into special revenue?
And there is.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Correct.
If you were to,
It's $9,447,000.
page 33,
Oh, geez.
we'll show you, page 33 will show you in the other governmental funds column, because it's a non-major fund.
Okay.
There was a prior period adjustment for $9.4 million. And essentially, GASB 84 was the cleanup of what all government has, a lot of stuff in fiduciary, and it just got very confusing. And so GASB's trying to clean that up. And there was about a 10-page flow chart that we have to go through to figure out whether something that was fiduciary should stay there, and whether something that wasn't should now be fiduciary. And so at the end of that long filter, it was determined that student activity funds, and basically it's because the district ultimately has control over those funds. So if the students wanted to go spend the money on something that was inappropriate, the district could still say, no, you can't do that. Right. And at that point, it trips one of the tests in GASB 84 that says, nope, that should be a governmental fund then. And so that's why those funds moved as part of the implementation of this standard.
Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion, questions? Are we ready for a motion?
I, Deborah Yates, move that the Audit Committee forward the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, ACFR, to the Board of Trustees for acceptance.
Any second?
I, Vito Ziri, second the motion.
Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion carries. Okay, next up is Chief Auditor for the Washoe County School District with his presentation of Report Fraud, Waste, and Abuse Hotline Concerns and Outcomes since our last meeting. Mr. Starkey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Kirk Starkey for the record. Chairman, members of the committee. Attached as part of your agenda packet and also on our screens is basically a status report of a spreadsheet we use to track all of our cases of waste, fraud, and abuse, and they're all in there since our last meeting. The ones on the top of the screen, at the top of your packet, there's 3 cases. Those are cases that are still open. They were reported at our last meeting, and they're still being worked, but they're still active cases. The ones at the bottom in the second grouping, there's 15 new cases. It's a significant number since our last meeting, and in my experience, we've had quite a bit of an uptick of cases. However, a lot of them have been closed for various reasons. Of those 15 new cases, we closed 6 of them by, they were basically referred to the appropriate responsible department to resolve. 4 were closed for being outside of our program scope, or the complainant making the complaint did not provide enough sufficient information to enable us to perform an investigation. 2 others we closed because from the investigation, we determined they did not have merit. 1 of them was closed after we determined it had merit and the matter has been addressed. And then we've got 2 more on there that are still open, and so we'll keep working them this quarter, and we'll report back to the committee at the next quarter. And that should conclude this. Thank you very much.
I had a question about.
Okay.
I had a question about the one regarding student activity fund with the Monty Ranch High School. As a parent, it always seems like there's a lot of requests for funds for this fee and that fee. Have we audited that in the rotation any time recently, or is there any plan to audit?
I don't believe, Kirk Starkey for the record, I do not believe we've done the student activity fund for DeMonte recently, but it will be, we do our risk assessment on which ones we'll audit, so we will get to that one. It will definitely, because of a high school, it's much more dollars running through the account, so it will come up. On this one, and why this one is still open, it's a good question you have, is we're waiting on additional information to be provided by the individual making the complaint, and
Okay.
to be able to close that one way or another.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm gonna.
Mr. Starkey, on the schools that you guys audit, is it based on a rotation that you have to hit every school at certain periods, or is it just based on your risk assessment?
No, great question. So we use, when selecting all of our audits, whether they're performance or the student activity fund for the school audits, we use a risk approach to it, and where there are different risk factors. So some of the schools, they might turn around and be audited a little sooner than others, let's say, based on the different factors. And but we try to get to them all. The thing is we're a small office, and we have an awful lot of schools, and I wish it's just the cycle through time is going to take a little effort. But the high schools are are much more time intensive than, let's say, the elementaries and the middle schools, due to the volume of monies coming through.
So you rely more on the risk assessment?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank.
I'll just add some further comments to that. That is a very common thing in auditing. You have limited resources, so you have to, take the highest risk items. Anything else from anybody on the hotline reports?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to circle back to what you were talking about, the student activity funds. And I do understand that there is, in my opinion, a staff shortage in regard to that. I feel like we should be auditing more of them more frequently. And I know as an auditor, I know, that's what you do. So
Correct.
That's what you would want to do. So not to add to the burden, but a thought that I had was perhaps another risk factor would be anytime there's a turnover at one of the major high schools would be one of those possible indicators for an audit. And that's just kind of more of a comment than anything else.
I can, Kirk Starkey for the record, it's a great point. We use that factor in our risk assessment for the departments and the schools themselves. When we hear, basically, if there's a changeover at the principal level, the bookkeeper level, we let's say add more risk points to the calculation. So yeah.
And I'll ask that question. Are hotline reports added as part of the risk calculation for a given, any given topic, really?
No, great question as well. It's if a hotline is a case is found to have merit, yes, we include it as part of our risk approach. If the complaints are not found to have merit, we do not assign any points to it that way. So basically, we track besides tracking all the cases, the ones that have merit, they get special attention, and they create let's say, the more chances of having an audit for a department in that regard.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else? Anybody on the Zoom meeting have any comments about hotline reports? All right, last thing, do we have anybody requesting public comment, Jean?
There's no public comment.
Thank you. All right, well, we're ready to move on to Mr. Starkey's next item, status of the update on the activities of the Internal Audit Department.
Thank you.
Again, sir.
Thank you. Kirk Starkey for the record. Committee, attached as part of your packet also is a spreadsheet that shows basically the status of the projects that our office is working on. It's based on the audit plan, the approved audit plan. And I'll just, this is an item for discussion, so just cut me off or any questions anytime, it's not a problem. But I'll just run through them kind of top to bottom just to give you a heads up of what our activities are. Right now, we're knee-deep getting started with the charter schools. Annually, we do monitoring work of the various charter schools within the district, 7 of them. And we hope it takes us a couple months, and then we compile all the results and report them out at the first of the year. So that's going to be what we're basically going to be focusing on for the next couple months. But in the meantime, we also have, as you can see, there's other projects we still have to work through. The audit follow-ups are previous audits that have been completed by the department. We don't anticipate getting to the follow-ups to the start of the calendar year because of the time frame doesn't come around until then. The student activity funds, we've got several in process. The Innovations High School is the one closest to being completed. And we're starting up Incline High School and Lemon Valley Elementary School. And we have a couple, the other one, Jesse Hall, will be started also this fiscal year. And one item of note, we do have we've gotten requests from management for a couple other student activity fund audits. I will probably, based on our current workload, it's impossible. We won't get to them this fiscal year, but I will be bringing them to the committee when we update our audit plan, just a heads up in that area. And the other audits, the performance audits that are currently in process are still transportation, student accounting, and the psych services audit. And the other audits below the other approved audit plans, based on the workload and the time frame on the other projects, those will not, we will not be getting to those this fiscal year, but I wanted to keep them on here. They're, I think last time I mentioned they're kind of placeholders just to not forget, not to let them fall off, that these are things we need to do. And then we have our administrative projects like our whistleblower hotline and our PNPs. We need to get those done, and those should be done at the end of December. Let's see. There is one other thing that's been, it's a heads up. I just wanted for the committee to be aware. We have another committee within the district, the Capital Funding Protection Committee, which does a lot of work with our capital improvement programs, basically new schools, facility repairs, and things of the matter. They may be making a request to do another audit of basically the professional services that the district deploys as architectural and design for our capital improvement program. If they so desire, we will be coming back to this committee and discussing it with more detail. I can't right now because this item is just a discussion, but I just want to give you a heads up at the next meeting. That might be one. It would be to amend our audit plan to accommodate that one. And I think that shall conclude this. Thank you.
Questions about upcoming audit plan? I have a couple. Under next to the last approved planned audits that are to be determined, is there anything on that list that was on the list last year at this time?
Yes, good question. Kirk Starkey for the record. The grants monitoring practices, I believe, was on there.
Okay.
The facility, I think the other two, I think were new for this, if I remember right. But grants, I know we've had for like probably a year and a half, 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. think that was it, actually. That was all I have as far as questions.
Okay.
Anybody? All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Starkey.
Thank you.
Excellent job. And then I think the last thing we have is the audit committee calendar for 2022.
Thank you. Chairman, members of the committee, Kirk Starkey for the record again. This item is, again, we always have this at the end of our committee meeting. It's just to kind of give you a high-level synopsis of what's upcoming basically in the next 4 meetings. Please note, though, we got a request based on most of our committee meetings occur typically scheduled for the second weeks of the month. We had a request to possibly consider going to the first week of the month, kind of like this meeting, or to the third week of the month. We're going to try and accommodate that request, but we have to run it through. We have a department here that does the scheduling for an awful lot of different committees within the district. But I wanted to let you know if you have hardships with those, if we were to move them to the first or the third weeks of the month, could you let me know sometime later after the meeting in the next coming few weeks, just as a heads up, and we'll contact the appropriate department for scheduling and get back to you. But I just want to throw it out there as a heads up as far as dates go. And if you have any questions with this calendar, do not hesitate to contact us like you do. We appreciate everything. So thank you.
Okay. Any comments, questions on that? Any public comment on that?
There's no public comment.
Okay, that brings us to any general public comments on any topics not addressed on the agenda.
No.
Okay, and then I think our next meetings, our next meeting will be scheduled for Thursday, February 10, 2022. And then we just went over what the planned meeting schedule is. It's still up on the screen. February 10th, May 12th, 2022, August 11th, 2022, all in the boardroom here at the Washoe County School District headquarters. Was this 400 East 9th Street specifically?
Pretty close, 425.
Okay. Well, here at the Washoe County School District meeting. So that, no public comments, and we've covered our agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Deborah Yates, I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Motion carries.